Did you read the card? Reading the card explains the card.
Reading the card explains the card. Originally said, or at least first used for comedic purposes on the Tolarian Community College channel, as far as I can tell. But since then, you'll see the simple phrase printed on playmats, t-shirts, sleeves, in the passive-aggressive response to newcomer Reddit posts. If you play Magic, chances are you've heard this phrase, or had it said to you at least once, because it works in Magic. Card effects are broken down into very concise and clear triggers and actions. The game was designed with keywords so that oftentimes a card effect can be conveyed with a single word or phrase. There is no context in the form of punctuation, you don't have to study the mad science that is timing in Magic. There's a stack of cards being played, and they simply do what they say they do. Reading the card explains the card. But does the same apply to, let's say, Yu-Gi-Oh? Let's not pretend that Yu-Gi-Oh card texts aren't horrendously over-complex and underdeveloped, as if the designers typed up the effect as they thought it up and just printed the first draft. But even so, technically even in Yu-Gi-Oh, reading the card explains the card. It's the glaring problems with Yu-Gi-Oh's approach to effects and how they are conveyed, and just how complex or long-winded those text boxes can really be, that is the true issue. I think because of this, a lot of players choose not to try. Look, I would never fault you for not understanding a card's effect and how to properly play it, or play around it. My board is a challenge for the uninitiated. A simple challenge that delivers a simple lesson. All you have to do is read the card. And no card exemplifies this more than the one and only
Cringe. There's no other word for it. This makes me cringe. It's embarrassing.
Alright, time for the boring talky bit. If you skipped ahead to this part of the video, I won't hold it against you, and if you enjoyed the first half of the video, consider liking and or subscribing. I'm going to cover the most important elements of this deck and some different ways to play it or build it, but I most likely won't cover everything. Let me further preface this by saying I'm in no means an expert on this deck, not a Yu-Gi-Oh expert, not a Golden Castle expert, and I made cuts and substitutions to fit my needs without taking up all my resources. So if you have any questions or suggestions, please drop a comment. I'll be sure to respond to as many as I can. The Golden Castle of Stromberg is a silly card that is the centerpiece of a fairy tale themed archetype, not to be mistaken with the fairy tale archetype that is also fairy tale themed, but also furries. It's a bit all over the place, not a very strong deck on its own, and will likely never get support. All the cards in the archetype are relatively weak, but get decent enough effects when you have the Golden Castle in play. Hexe Trude is the only one you're really ever going to play, and the bird is mostly for fetching the castle itself. When we focus less on the Golden Castle of Stromberg as an archetype, the deck really improves. And to understand what I mean by that, first we need to go over the Golden Castle's hilariously gross effect. Skipping ahead to the card's main effect, during your main phase you can special summon one monster that lists Golden Castle of Stromberg in its text. You'll be using this effect a lot just to get a free Hexe Trude, which has the effect to banish a card on the field if you have the castle up, make an additional attack on monsters, and when it destroys a monster you get to buff any monster's attack up by 400. It's worth noting here that Hex can actually be summoned without tribute if you control a castle, so you only need to special summon her from the deck if you don't already have her in hand. Not bad! Honestly not the most wild effect in modern Yu-Gi-Oh, but it's Hex's banishing effect and how easy she is to summon that makes her a staple in this deck. Golden Castle Stromberg's other effect that everyone fails to read is when an opponent's monster declares an attack, destroying the attacking monster and inflicting damage to your opponent equal to half the attack of said monster. Every time I played Golden Castle, my opponent would attack into it at least once. When I set out to play this deck, I had certainly hoped I'd get to use this effect a few times, but I never expected it to be as effective as it was. I think only one person actually played around it on purpose. It was eye-opening, and it really set the tone for this video. Now that half damage is nice and all, but you aren't winning games with that alone. You need a big stick to finish them off. In come Golden Castle's most useful effect, its cost. During your standby phase, you must banish 10 cards from the top of your deck face down. This cost is not optional, and if you aren't able to banish the 10 cards, your castle is destroyed. So firstly, this isn't the cost to activate the card, it's the cost to keep the card. Keep that in mind. Second, and mainly, it's that cost that makes this deck work. In comes your big stick, Gren Maju Eiza. This card's attack and defense are equal to the number of banished cards times 400, and that's it. A single line of text on a level 3 monster. One round of your Golden Castle's effect ensures this monster will have 4000 attack and defense, already more than enough to kill most monsters, but your castle protects you and makes it very easy to continue to banish cards, so when the time comes, your Gren Maju is buffed beyond comparison just in terms of attack and defense. Folks, there's nothing overly flashy from here on out. Gren Maju gets big and you win. It gains defense too, so place it in face down defense, and when your opponent gets the attack in, they're met with a thick ass fiend. A lot of decks won't play around a face down defense position monster. They'll exhaust resources destroying your castle first, your Hexe Trude first, possibly your Eater of Millions. A monster I hadn't heard of when I first put together this deck that lets you easily banish even more cards by banishing as many cards as you want from your extra deck, hand, or field to special summon it. It gets a small amount of attack and defense from the amount you choose to banish, but those stats aren't really what's important. You're just wanting more cards banished, and Eater will banish anything it battles, making it a decent line of defense and a target. With all this banishing, you can find yourself in a bad spot without necessary cards being available in your deck. So we play Necroface to shuffle them all back into the deck, practically giving you a fresh start at winning late in the game. You'll run into opponents that think they figured out how to win by stalling until you deck out, but then you just hit the reset button and they don't know what to do. Pot of Extravagance is a no-brainer in this one. You don't need your extra deck and you want cards banished. You could use Pot of Desires for similar results if you do want to use your extra deck or have more fodder for Eater of Millions, but I like Extravagance, sue me. Kaijus and Nibirus are perfect for this deck because you're not scared of giving your opponent strong monsters because they can't do anything with them for the most part if you've got Castle. And you bet your sweet Bippy I've Nibiru'd people giving them massive Nibiru tokens just for them to attack into my Golden Castle with it. Very satisfying. The rest of this deck is pretty standard affair with the abundance of dark monsters. Allure of Darkness was a great fit. I'm only playing a 50 card variant of the deck for a tiny bit more consistency. For my own taste, 10 more cards would have felt unnecessary. Given that the field spell is the most important card in the deck, and the 3 copies of the bird, Terraforming, and Metaverse might as well be additional copies of the castle. To wrap things up, this deck is very simple, but really fun, and it is fun seeing how few people read cards in this game. If I'm being honest with you though, I don't recommend you build this deck if you don't already have a bulk of the cards, or just really think you'll enjoy it. It had a better win rate than I expected, but every win I relied on luck, and your opponent not reading the castle's whole effect. When I made this deck, I had opened 30 plus packs trying to get my 3 copies of Golden Castle, and for whatever reason, I couldn't pull it. So I had to craft them all, and it was definitely not worth those ultra rare resources. Regardless of whether or not you feel the need to make this deck yourself now, I hope you enjoyed this video and maybe got something useful from it. I'm already working on my next deck profile video covering a deck that I've always wanted to play and should be a fun one for sure. If you have any suggestions for decks I should check out, please by all means let me know. And I'm gonna do my best to start putting these out regularly for everyone that seems to enjoy them. Hope you have a good one, and remember, stay classy, always be courteous, but fuck shit up. Okay, I love you, bye!